Welcome, everyone, to the League of Women Voters Empowering You series, the program designed by the League of Women Voters in partnership with Dayton Access Television, providing unbiased, nonpartisan information on issues that are relevant to our friends and neighbors throughout the greater Dayton area. The League of Women Voters mission focuses as much on education as it does on voting, and the League has various positions on government, social policy, and natural resources. My name is David Bodary. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters and your host as tonight we discuss the topic, the existence and impact of misinformation and disinformation in our information-rich world and how we can respond. Our guest today is zooming in with us. His name is Josh Sweigart. He is editor and investigative reporter for the Dayton Daily News. Josh has won several awards for his reporting, including an Emmy Award, a Delta Chi Award from the Society of Professional Journalists, and additional awards from the Associated Press Society of Ohio. Josh, we're here in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information, and I hope today we can dive into not just the impact of misinformation and disinformation, but also on practical ways that the average person can navigate, respond, and critically engage with that flood of media around us. So welcome, and thanks for Zooming with me tonight. Let's start by talking. Oh, I'm so happy that you're here. And again, because you did this with me, it's been a couple years ago, I think. Let's start by first digging into a little bit about what is disinformation and how might that be different from misinformation?
Well, I think the biggest difference is intent. I mean, misinformation is somebody getting the facts wrong, somebody meaning well perhaps, but misstating something or misconstruing something or maybe misunderstanding something. Disinformation is intentional. It's propaganda. And it's growing in popularity. I would say eclipsed perhaps misinformation at this point. It's an intentional effort to mislead you, to lie to you, and to get you to take action or not take action based on that false information. It's a lie.
Yeah. And we know, of course, that because of the information-rich world we're in today, this misinformation can spread rapidly online, sometimes through simply sharing a meme or a post. I think that because of the speed at which social media and technology advances, we're in a different place than when our communication was printed in a newspaper that was available once a week or in letters that we would send to one another that took 4 days to arrive, right? For the average person then scrolling through social media, what specific steps can they take to maybe filter out some of the disinformation or the misinformation?
I mean, if you can avoid it altogether, then that's a trick, and teach me how to do it. I mean, social media is designed as an outrage machine. It's designed in such a way that in addition to the people you follow, it's going to sort of algorithmically determine what gets your juices flowing, what really works you up, and it's going to show you more and more of that because you can't help but engage with it, whether it's good or bad. Obviously, the biggest thing one can do is who you follow, the sources you intentionally go to and follow, following credible sources, contemplating, understanding the motivations of those various sources, and whether they're trying to inform you, whether they're trying to give you objective, unbiased news, or whether they're trying to influence you or get you to take some action or not take some action. So, I mean, yeah, the biggest thing you can do is contemplate who you follow. Are you following traditional news sources from journalists that actually have a commitment to giving you news, or are you following organizations that may be funded by the far left or the far right that are trying to misinform you in the interest of kind of getting you to follow along with them?
And I want to pick up on that term you used, that in some ways they're intentionally trying to enrage me, intentionally trying to get me to light up, to click in an aggressive way saying, well, that's stupid, or I can't believe, and then I dig deeper and I dig deeper, and then pretty soon I'm down in a rabbit hole of misinformation and repeatedly, right, being misinformed potentially, or disinformation, repeatedly being exposed to a message that isn't in any way factual at all.
I mean, politics right now is so visceral and so personal. I mean, there are people out there who despise Donald Trump and people out there who despise Kamala Harris. And if you're fed information that makes it look like they did something terrible, then that's going to confirm your hatred of them, and you're going to share it quickly. And maybe you could stop for a moment and be like, did they really say that? Like, okay, they're humans. They're not evil. You may disagree with them, but are they really saying these terrible things, or is somebody misconstruing what they're saying? And so that's where the trap is that it really feeds into your inherent biases and your inherent strong feelings and tries to get you to hook you based on that.
For sure. So you're a journalist, and your intention is to try to be sort of fair and balanced, I presume. Tell me, what are some of the sources that you turn to when you're looking for what you can confidently sort of rely on as accurate information? Are there resources that you like?
Absolutely. I mean, first off, journalists are fallible. It's not like we're incapable of mistakes or even letting subtle biases work their way into the news. But we have the express intent to try to avoid those and minimize those, and B, a process in place. We have editors that read things, copy editors that read things, an intentional process to make sure that we're including diverse opinions, that we're taking everyone's worldview into account, and we're not picking one side or the other in these things. We have the process to do this because that's kind of the relationship, the deal we have with our readers is this is the product we're providing to you, is this unbiased news to the best of our ability. There's lots of outlets out there that do not do that. Either don't have the journalistic rigor to do it, or just have no intention of doing it because their goal is to misinform, or at least to manipulate or get you to do something or not do something. So as far as sources, I mean, I would say for the most part, local news is a fantastic source. Most local news outlets, like the Dayton Daily News or whatever community you live in, do try really, 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 really hard to avoid those biases and to provide objective truth, because that's what our readers are coming to us for. They're not wanting opinion, they're wanting, in our news coverage at least, they're wanting just the truth. I mean, beyond that, there's a lot of resources. I mean, on the national scale, there's a lot of media sort of bias charts out there, and most of them are generally pretty accurate. I mean, if you look at like Reuters and the AP, fall pretty well in the middle. Then there's fact-checking websites out there, like PolitiFact and Snopes, and there's a few others. And then part of it is sort of, and again, if you find credible news sources, then what we do is we try to provide this information for you so you don't have to do a bunch of research, because it just takes a lot of time. But sometimes it's worth doing your little bit of research. If you find a video of somebody saying something, go watch the whole video and see if perhaps that's being misconstrued or taken out of context. Because I see that all the time on social media. Somebody have a clip like, can you believe Donald Trump said this? And it's like 9 words. And then you watch the full speech, and in context, it can mean something completely different than what the actual clip made it sound like. So yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I would say, I mean, traditional news sources are your best choice. And then sometimes it's a matter of finding the source documents from there.
Right. And certainly traditional news sources, but then having a variety of those news sources. You mentioned some, I forget the right term that you used, but when they sort of chart out the media bias chart, I'm not getting the word right though. Do you remember?
Yeah, there's I think, I forget what they call them, media bias charts or something like that. And usually they have an X and Y axis, and one of them is partisan leaning, and one of them is like accuracy and reliability.
Right.
And I mean, those could be manipulated as well, I suppose, but the ones that I traditionally see are generally pretty accurate. I mean, there are far left and far right organizations that are trying to manipulate you, and then there's a lot in the middle. I mean, like I said, Reuters, AP. I mean, obviously, the Dayton Daily News. We focus on local news, and State House news. If you look at the broader State House, I mean, there's the Columbus Dispatch, the number of, I think Signal just launched a new State House website with Andrew Tobias, a reporter that I know and does really good work. And so there are a number of State House sources you could be following. Axios is another one. And then there's on the national level, I mean, there's Perhaps it's weirder because the bigger you get, almost the harder it is to find enough objective sources. But I mean, most traditional outlets, NBC, CBS, the New York Times, the Washington Post, even Fox News, if you're looking at their news website, not their opinion content,
Right.
those are mostly staffed by professional journalists that are trying to give you the objective information. To your point, yeah, it doesn't hurt to consume from a few different outlets, because even if there's no bias, sometimes things are interpreted differently. One reporter might seize on one detail of a press conference, whereas another reporter might seize on a different detail. So it's always good to get a sort of a variety in your diet, just like your your actual diet. Get a variety to get all that nutritional, tasty news.
I love that analogy, and you're right, having that variety in my diet so that I get some that are maybe more conservative newspapers or resources, maybe some that are more progressive or liberal, some that maybe are more middle of the road. I sometimes love the BBC because it's not an American perspective at all. It's a perspective from outside the U.S., of the U.S., and I think that sometimes can be really healthy for me too. I also have used a variety of fact-check kinds of resources. So you mentioned Snopes. That's one that I use regularly when I think, really, Mr. Rogers is covered in tattoos and was a Marine sniper? Because I just don't believe that. And thankfully, Snopes confirmed that that was made up. And yet, I would get emails from close friends who were like, did you know? Well, yeah, you might want to check the accuracy of that, right? Factcheck.org is another resource that I've used, so I appreciate those suggestions. PolitiFact, you mentioned, so those are all helpful resources for us to check the accuracy of what we think. You know, the other day, I was doing a virtual conference with the National Communication Association, and the speaker put up a still photograph of a man, just his picture of his face. And then with several clicks, he was able, through AI, to make that into a talking face, like I'm talking now, and then put words to his face. So in essence, he took a still photograph and made that then face move and talk like it was saying whatever the words are that they wanted them to say. So AI has the ability, I'm afraid, to do things that look like are very real, but in fact never occurred and perhaps never will occur. Certainly it's all made up. So you got to be really, I think, careful about what we begin to take on as truth or accuracy. So, all right, you use some of the tools that I use, and I appreciate that. Social media has the ability, though, to kind of spread the misinformation. Are there things that maybe we can do to help reduce the spread, either accidental or intentional, of misinformation through our own behavior? Things that you can suggest?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the spread of misinformation. I've been thinking a lot lately about, I think it's Mark Twain that said, a lie can make it halfway around the world while the truth is still putting its shoes on. I mean, it's scary, and we've seen this recently with a lot of political stuff and how quickly misinformation and disinformation spreads. In much faster than any actual than the truth that often follows it, because obviously a fact check has to follow some sort of claim, and that claim gets to millions of people before somebody has the time to confirm that it's true or not, and then get that information out there, and then the people who already shared it have to care enough to actually go back and see whether or not it's true. So to your point, the number one thing that we could do is just think twice before hitting that share button. Read the article before sharing it.
Not just the headline?
Right, exactly. I mean, often you see people who are completely misunderstanding, misconstruing something, and then sharing it, and it's like, that's not really what it says there. And so, yeah, I mean, be sure about what you're reading and what you're looking at before you share it. That's the number one thing. I mean, there's a study that I remember reading a couple of years ago about misinformation and all this thing, and it said that when somebody's fooled on social media, when they believe something and they find out later that it's not true, they don't blame themselves for not following up and not being thorough enough about it. They blame everyone else for lying to them, and their overall trust in everything goes down, traditional media and everything else. And so we reach this world where disinformation, misinformation not only can fool people, but it undermines the entire trust that people have in our information ecosystem. And that's a scary thing to have in a democracy. So yeah, think twice before hitting the share button.
I appreciate what you say. We have to be thoughtful about how that misinformation and that disintegration of trust, a phrase that I've heard described as truth decay, not tooth decay, but truth decay, right, really impacts our ability to function as a democratic society. Because if you don't believe the information, then how can you be informed to make a decision that can influence then your community? I think sometimes in our searching, we find information that simply confirms our own assumptions. It's known as confirmation bias. And so then we simply stop looking for new information. Do you encounter that, and how do you manage that, especially as a journalist who's really charged with not falling for that trap?
I mean, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. Again, if you have these preconceived notions, this view of the world, and somebody presents something to you that reinforces that view of the world, it just makes you feel good. And that good feeling is powerful. And so you have to stop and ask yourself, okay, is this just telling me what I want to hear? I mean, also when you're reading, so again, contemplating what sources to consume, contemplate what voices are in that content that you're consuming. Are you hearing from the left and the right? Is that article or video you're watching giving the opportunity for multiple angles to address and speak to the issue? Often these confirmation bias things just kind of give you one little piece of information and then they get really worked up about it. And you don't hear anyone else from any other perspective on that issue. So that's a big part of it. Is, okay, what are other people saying about it? Again, seeing the source documents, a credible news outlet is transparent. We try to share the video if we're talking about a press conference on our website. We'll share the documents that something came from. So I mean, having that transparency, so readers have the ability to watch the video, read the documents. They know where it came from. We attributing things to people, like here's who said this, here's who this quote is attributed to. I mean, there are times when traditional news outlets and professional journalists use anonymous sources, but it's not often.
Right.
We have a very high standard with the Dayton Daily News for using anonymous sources. And so it is healthy and right to be skeptical of people tell me, sources say, here's what I'm hearing from the inside, without actually attributing that to anyone. So, I mean, yeah, be cognizant of the variety of content within the thing you're reading, and then, like you said, the variety of content you're consuming, and then the transparency of those media outlets to tell you where they're getting their information from.
I appreciate that. You know, I think as I think about examples, it's hard for me not to think about the recent Springfield situation that got a lot of national attention because there was a claim that immigrants that were in Springfield were misusing or in some way harming people's
They were
pets.
eating the cats and dogs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it was on the surface, I'm like, wow. And of course, that becomes the kind of thing that you just want to like share and can you believe this? But when you dig into it, and I appreciate what the Dayton Daily News did, as you dug into it and you got voices from Springfield, and then you attended events in Springfield and you were able to report on those things. So, and of course, our local Yellow Springs-based WYSO also sent journalists to Springfield, and they were able to capture those voices as well. And then I would hear those on the national public radio station that I listened to. So I do think that what you're suggesting really matters, right? We get those voices from lots of different perspectives.
And I think, and that's a really good example because that information, that tweet is really all, well, not even a tweet, I'm sorry, it was a Facebook comment in a group there on Facebook. This woman says that there's 4 people removed. My neighbor's sister's friend says that her cat got stolen and then somebody found it hanging from a tree. This claim, which was made on social media, got picked up by some influencers, blown up around the world. Again, halfway around the world. By the time that we were even aware that this was becoming a thing, it had probably been shared to hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions. Our reporter in Springfield News Sun is one of our sister publications, was the first to call the city of Springfield and say, hey, are there any reports of this happening? And they were like, no, there have not been reports of this happening. And so we were able to get that fact check up relatively quickly, still like a day or two after this. People have been sharing this thing over and over and over again. And of course, then it got multiplied and picked up and magnified on the national stage. And so since then, there have been multiple examples of something will be put out there, some information will be put out there. I see it on a daily basis pertaining to the Springfield, the Haitian population in Springfield, and taking the time to fact check these things, taking the time to get the records, talk to the people, takes time. And so by the time we're intentional about when we're not going to rush something out. When we report it, we want it to be true. We don't want to be it's great to be the first to report it, but it's more important that we have our facts straight. And so we will get information out there after this false information is spreading for a long time. And so that's the role of journalists. And so sometimes it's worthwhile to go back and double check. Hey, that thing that I heard about, is there any truth to that? And there's been a ton of disinformation around that topic, and we're doing our best to try to get the facts out there, because there are legitimate issues going on in Springfield. The Springfield News Sun's been covering the issue of the Haitian population influx for years. That they've been covering that issue. So covering it responsibly and level-headedly without all the screaming and the vitriol. And so that's what professional journalists do versus somebody sharing something on Facebook that is of spurious credibility to begin with, which unfortunately, makes it around the world twice before we can get our shoes on.
Yeah, great example. And think about Mark Twain living in a world when, we were printing, but that took a long time. Imagine what he would think of the world today. So pretty crazy. I just want to thank you, obviously, for recognizing that what journalists do matter. I mean, it's why we call journalism the fourth estate, right? It's the part of our democracy that is so essential to the effectiveness of citizens being able to then make choices as we, starting today, can make as we vote and elect people that we hope will represent us effectively. Without the work that journalists do, we couldn't do that as well. So thank you. This is actually National Media Literacy Week coming up October 21st through 25th. So it's a great time to emphasize media literacy. It's not just a skill for journalists, but it's something that every citizen needs to have in our democracy. From your perspective, are there media literacy skills that you would like to see more people have?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on this a moment ago. I think that when you're consuming media, be cognizant of sort of what it contains. Is it telling you just what you want to hear? Is that content providing a variety of sources and voices around the issue? Are they transparent about where they're getting their information? Another thing that is confusing to people is the difference between opinion and news reporting. Cable television kind of blurred that line over the last few years, and now it's complete. There is no line on social media between the two. Traditionally, when you had the newspaper, there's a section of the newspaper that's labeled opinions or ideas and voices or editorial page, and that's where people would write their opinions, and then you had the rest of the paper, which was mostly objective news gathering. A lot of the cable television voices that get the most attention are not journalists. They will tell you they're not journalists. They are commentators. It's their job to sort of talk about issues and provide their perspective on issues. And I mean, that's on the left and the right, your Hannitys and your Maddows. They are there to provide perspective and commentary, not objective news. So knowing the difference between opinion programming or it's not just programming. I mean, if you're getting your information from some advocacy organization, they're not doing this to inform you. They're doing this to engage you and for you to follow their cause. And so, I mean, a lot of people get their media now through social media. And unless it's from a traditional news source of some kind, you're probably getting it from some partisan outlet or partisan or ideological group that has one goal, and that's to get you to act on their behalf to carry out these sort of missions. So understand the difference between journalism and opinion or advocacy is extremely important.
I would even go as far as to say that we have to understand the difference between journalism and entertainment. And many students, at least in my classroom, are getting their news from the late night sort of comedy, what's the right word for that? Like the Late Late Show, right? Or those kinds of things. And they do have newsy information, right? They do touch on news of the day, but that doesn't mean you fully understand the nature of what the news is. And there is often some level of bias or perspective angle that's being introduced, whether it's Stephen Colbert or any of the other sort of late night comedians.
Yeah, I've seen, John Oliver and Jon Stewart, I've seen both of them say, like, look, we are not your primary news source. Like, we should not be, like, we're a comedy show. We provide our content and entertainment and important perspective at times, perhaps, but we're not a news source. I've seen both John Oliver and Jon Stewart say that, and it's like, yeah, that's.
And yet the reality is, at least the consumers that are in my classroom, right, and these are younger people mostly, oftentimes are not getting their news anywhere else. They're getting it from those kinds of places, or it's coming across their feed in a social media sense. So then it's really, who's paying to be on that feed, or what are the ways in which they are encountering things based on their previous likes, dislikes, likes, or other sorts of clicks, right?
And it's organic, especially through social media, again, where a lot of younger people are getting their news. The difference between paid advertisement and content is indiscernible. Occasionally you'll see a political ad that I'm so-and-so and I support this message, but more often than not, it's hidden. It's packaged in some influencer or some video, and it's subtle, and so a lot of news and partisan sort of commentary people get is bought and paid for, but it's not even clear that you're being provided this information like from some partisan source. It just looks like some guy giving his opinion. Well, a lot of those people are actually financially supported by the parties or by dark money groups and all that stuff. So it's a lot of people, the information they're getting online, they don't even realize that they're being misinformed. Because they don't realize that these groups are intentionally trying to mislead them.
Right. And it comes back to the way in which the mathematics, right, of the social media tools have sort of calculated what's going to get people to stay on longer, to click longer, to watch more of the true paid kinds of advertising that is funding, whether it's X or Twitter or Facebook or whatever, right? Meta, all of the whatever, fill in the TikTok, whatever brand you want to go with. Well, so it's challenging. There are lots of challenges I think that we all face. And as we prepare to close up our time together, is there anything else important that we haven't touched on that you think is crucial for viewers to remember when we think about misinformation, maybe media literacy, and our role as informed citizens?
One of the things that this disinformation does is it works to sort of vilify the other side, to drive a wedge and sort of between people on issues and try to make that gulf sort of impossible to overcome. And so I think it's important to have conversations with people. My kids come to me all the time because they're on social media and they're seeing things on YouTube and stuff like, oh, can you believe this, and this? I'm like, no, I can't, I don't, because it's not true. And in fact, these people aren't, the people who disagree with you aren't evil because they disagree with you. They're not villains. Have a conversation with them. Try to see things from their perspective. Take a moment and try to contemplate that other perspective. You don't have to agree with it, but you should at least acknowledge it and give it a little bit of thought. So I think that's part of an unfortunate outcome of this whole disinformation thing, is driving a wedge in our society. And I think it's important. I know you've done other things about sort of how to bring down the political rancor. It's more important than ever that we talk to people we disagree with in a level-headed, meaningful way, and try to get past just this vilification that is expounded by all this misinformation and disinformation.
I appreciate that very much. I suspect that the level of disinformation and misinformation that we've encountered thus far in the last month or so here in the Springfield, Dayton area is not going to go away, that we're going to encounter more of this in the days and weeks to come. So in a way, I guess I want to help inoculate people to say, hey, if it seems too good to be true, if it seems unbelievable, it probably is. So let's be cautious about it. I want to thank our guest, Josh Sweigart, editor and investigative reporter for the Dayton Daily News, and thank you for watching. The League of Women Voter Empowering You program that the League, I want to thank you because the League encourages everyone to be active as citizens in our community. This includes being educated about government, social policy, and the environment, and making sure that we're all registered to vote and then actively voting every election. Remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. If you need help, maybe learning how to vote, or if you're looking for the voter guides, you will be able to find those by contacting the League. That's email the League at league@lwvdayton.org, or you can call the office at 937-228-4041. Josh, thank you for your time, and thank you, viewers, for your time as well.